Ah, Ron, of course. How could I forget Eugene, Oregon? All right. So we've got 24 people here, which is terrific. And I will keep admitting folks as they arrive. But I'd like for us to get started. And I know that we probably have a few people who were not able to make it to the first session. And during the first session, I wanted to dive right in to presentation mode because we had a lot of ground to cover, and I didn't do anything that was kind of a way for us to get to know each other at all. There's too many of us to do a big go around, but what I'd like to do is I'd like to call on, uh, I'm going to call on uh, Brandon from Kehilat Sukkot Shalom. And I'm gonna put you on the spot and ask if you would be willing to just tell us where your congregation is located and something that you find quirky or lovable about your congregation. And you'll have to unmute yourself to do it. Jody says she can't wait to hear it. I'm not sure if Brandon's able to do it just now. Jody, would you be willing to do the honors?
I'm so sorry. I just had one dog attack the other dog. I was out of the room for a second, so I have no idea what I've been prompted to do.
Sorry, I put you on the spot. All I did was I asked if you could tell folks where your congregation is located and something you find quirky or lovable about it.
So we are in Columbus, Ohio. Jody is also with Kehilat Sukkot Shalom. Um, and I think I wouldn't call it quirky, but one of the things that I love about it is that we are entirely lay-led. And so every time we come together, it's someone different giving their own perspective and bringing their own framework to everything we're doing. And then everyone else gets to participate in that and take something new away from it to bring in the next time. So it's like this ongoing Jewish dialectical thing, and it's just lovely and exciting.
That is awesome. That is awesome. Okay, I'm gonna jump over to Stephanie from Ner Shalom.
So it's something we find quirky and
And where are you?
yeah, so okay, hi, I'm Stephanie. I'm from Congregation Air Shalom in Cotati, California, which is about an hour north of San Francisco. And we have a just a I can't even I can't say what's quirky about it really. It's just um I don't know, we're just a community with a really big heart. That's just what I want to say,
That's
like all
good.
of our shoals, but yeah, really strong social justice arm and wonderful volunteers, and everybody's really just the amount of dedication and effort that everybody puts in to make this a really wonderful place for the community is it's a joy to be a part
This is awesome.
of.
This is awesome. Okay, Donna Cohen Avery.
Hey there. Why did I know I'd be next? I just had this feeling. Hi, everybody. I would echo a lot of what Stephanie said. Our synagogue is very warm. It's very welcoming. I think we seek to be diverse in terms of who our members are, and we're really open, and we want to remain open to everybody. I think that's a very strong goal. And right now we are not lay led. We do have rabbinic leadership, and we have had periods where we have and periods where we haven't, but we are definitely community led. We definitely want to be a congregation led organization where the rabbi works for us and we work together with the rabbi. But the spirit behind what we're doing comes from the community.
So these are wonderful shares, and part of what I was doing as I was listening to each of you was I was trying to imagine some of what you just said very naturally and spontaneously being a part of what is called your core story, which is something we're going to get to this evening. So thank you all for doing that. We'll keep we'll do three more next time, and we'll keep doing. If we do three more each time, I think we'll get everybody who's signed up. Tonight our focus is storytelling, and this is kind of the second of two sessions at the beginning of the course that are looking at some sort of broader foundational aspects of the material that's included in the guide to fundraising. Next time, we'll begin the first of three sessions in a row that deal with very specific types of fundraising campaigns and take a much more sort of instructional and detail-oriented look at what it would take to actually put on any of those types of activities or campaigns. And tonight we'll have a chance to do more interactive stuff than we did before. Having said all of that, I'm going to now jump into our slideshow. And hopefully that is there on the screen. Give me a holler, unmute yourself and give me a holler if you're looking at something completely different. Hopefully you're looking at the slide that says storytelling. So tonight, we're going to do something that's both simple and powerful. We're going to turn the everyday life of your congregation into stories that inspire people to give. This is not about adding fancy polish or hyping things up. This is about helping people feel emotionally connected to the community they already care about. Over the next stretch, we'll walk step by step through how to find the right stories, how to tell them clearly, and how to make sure every one of them leads to a meaningful ask. We'll pause a couple times along the way for some activities, interactive activities, so you can start shaping, getting a feel for what it's like to shape stories of your own so that they become fundraising stories. Okay. So in synagogue fundraising, storytelling is not an optional flourish. It's the main ingredient. And stories are what's going to create the spark that makes people want to invest in the life of the congregation. When we tell a story well, donors can picture inspiring things. A bar mitzvah boy with severe dyslexia doing a presentation based on a diorama he created instead of doing a typical Devar Torah. A family that descended from Jewish conversos that moved to town from Mexico and just celebrated completing their conversions to Judaism after a year of study with the rabbi and participation in the congregation. A photo in the local paper of the rabbi getting arrested for protesting cruel treatment of immigrants. The same photo that a local detainee saw and later told a reporter gave her hope during her darkest moments. People don't give to budgets, they give to people and to moments and to a sense of feeling excited about belonging. Storytelling is how we make that connection visible, authentic, and heartfelt. When you tell a fundraising story, you're not only describing an event or a person, You are inviting the listener or reader to step in to a shared narrative. You are showing them this is who we are. This is what we've accomplished. And these are some of the ripple effects of what we do. And here's where you can help us go next. Okay. So, one of the biggest mistakes that people make is telling a beautiful story, but forgetting to finish it with a clear call to action. That call to action is what we call the ask. Every good fundraising story needs an ending that tells the listener exactly what to do next. So imagine a moving story about a particular impact of a synagogue program that concludes with an ask. What you don't want is to make the ask vague or bland, like this example. Don't just write, please consider making a donation, please give generously. Instead, we want to make it specific. Please make a gift before Simchat Torah to fund the next year of our teen music program. See how much better that is, but actually, it could be even better, even more specific. Please make a gift before Simchat Torah, October 2nd, to fund the next year of our teen music program. You've seen what this program can do. Be a part of its next chapter. So, what I want to do now is I'm actually going to send you into breakout groups of 2 or 3. And once I send you there, I just want to ask for each pair or triad to pick one person, and that person will answer the question, when was one time that my synagogue made me feel at home? And I'm only going to give you 2 minutes, and then I'm going to bring you back. So let me say the question again. Only one of you needs to respond to the question. Your challenge as a group is to decide who will do that. And the question is, what was one time that my synagogue made me feel at home? Okay, so now let me move us into breakout rooms. Great. Off you go.
Can't unmute. I'm not in a breakout room, Maurice.
Oh dear, did it offer you an opportunity to join one?
It did not.
Why would it not do that?
Well, I came on 5 minutes late.
I don't think that should matter. You're
Oh,
right.
here I am. I see it. Okay, thanks.
Okay, bye. See you soon. I'm happy you're all coming back. This was also partly a opportunity for me to try to build my Zoom management skills. I was a little afraid you might all disappear forever.
I am hesitant to offer this, but one of the things we do well at Neshalom is we have a Zoom shamus for everything so that the rabbi or teacher, whoever's leading it, doesn't have to do that. If you would like me to function at that and you make me as co-host, then I'd be willing to start that next time.
That is so kind. I'll be in touch.
Okay.
Maybe that I'm leaning yes.
Yeah, I mean, just little things. You don't need to worry about barking dogs.
Sherry
Right?
is the best, Maurice.
That's
And
amazing.
If
not
she,
anymore.
if
Rory's
she,
the best, but I can do
no,
it.
but if she's offered, Maurice, take her up on the offer. It'll make your life so much easier.
This is good. This is good to know. Okay, so for those who were just popping back to all of us being together, just got a lovely offer from Sherry Brenner from Ner Shalom in Katati to do some Zoom jockeying going forward. And I just learned that when I tried to bring you all back right away, you actually got an extra 60 seconds. And this is good. So now I'm going to tell you that having you do that was kind of a warm-up exercise. I just kind of wanted to have you have a first round of having somebody share something from the heart about their synagogue to somebody else. I'm not even going to ask you to share examples of that. I'm going to jump us back into what we were talking about, which was um, things about the importance of the ask. And I want to go back a step. There we go. So we know that we want the ask to be really specific. The more specific and vivid, the better. And we know that there's no point in having a fundraising story if there isn't an ask. And actually, the ask also has to tell people what it is that they can need to do as their next step in order to donate. So now we're going to move on from talking about the ask to talking about thinking about your audience. So every fundraising story needs an audience. It doesn't matter if it's a 3-sentence social media post or a 3-paragraph email or a 2-minute long appeal from the Bima. And when I say every fundraising story needs an audience, what I mean really is every fundraising story needs an intended primary audience. Okay. This is true even if you're going to be sending this story out to the whole congregation. There are some occasions when the primary audience will be the whole congregation, but a lot of the time it will be a segment within the congregation. As you work to create fundraising stories, you'll want to be asking yourself as you're shaping the story, are we talking to and what matters most to them right now? And it all is going to depend partly on what type of fundraising campaign it is and what its specific goals are, and whether or not you want to have a subgroup of your congregation be the primary intended audience and other groups kind of be in a secondary audience place. Let me elaborate on this. A message to retirees about donating from their retirement accounts shouldn't sound the same as a campaign aimed primarily at religious school parents. And I want to encourage you to experiment with telling different versions of the same inspiring story for different audiences within your congregation. You'll probably end up emphasizing different details or connecting the same story to different life priorities for different audiences. Not all of your fundraising appeal messages need to be tailored for different subgroups within your congregation. Segmenting your overall audience is not always called for, but when segmenting is a good idea, you can make the same inspiring story do a lot of work for you by tailoring it to appeal more to specific subgroups. Okay, now that we've covered a couple of key principles of storytelling for fundraising, let's pivot to a practical exercise. Let's imagine you've been assigned to write a fundraising appeal message for a spring campaign that seeks to raise funds to pay for a new roof, an unexpected expense that needs to be dealt with this year. Here's what you know so far. Your story needs to end with a very specific ask, and you want to identify a primary audience that you're talking to, even though there will be multiple secondary audiences, and the messages will be delivered to the whole congregation. You also know another important thing. Fundraising works best when we tell stories about real people, not abstractions. Real people like this person on your screen. You decide that you're going to talk to some different members, asking them to tell stories about a time when the synagogue felt like home to them. Ultimately, you're going to choose one person, one family, or one small group whose experience shows the impact of your synagogue's work. Let's assume that you're able to get permission to share their story, to even to quote them, and to use photos of them. Real details always land more powerfully than generalities. So now you're on your way. By the way, in this example, the question you asked members was about a time they felt like home, right? I picked that because of the connection between having a roof over our heads and feeling at home. But there are many different possible questions or prompts that you could use when interviewing members for good stories for your Fund the New Roof campaign. You could have gone around asking people, tell me about the first Shabbat that you can remember um, since you joined the synagogue, or what changed for you after joining that committee or joining the choir? Or was there a moment when you realized that this congregation really mattered to you? Tell me about that. When you are doing these informal conversations slash stealthy interviews, try to capture one or two short memorable quotes that you could potentially use verbatim. All of this will give the story a voice and authenticity that you can't invent later. So now I'm going to pop onto the screen a fictional story that one of us has gathered from a willing congregant, and I'm going to ask if anybody whose name begins with the letter D would unmute themselves and read it aloud.
Sure. This is Danielle.
Thank you.
I came to the Purim Ball at Ner Tzedek dressed as a, oh no, everybody's in my way. Dressed as a pop star who ended up being a one-hit wonder. I'd only been a member for 2 weeks. Some of the older members were asking me who I was dressed as when Cheryl approached me. She was a goofy pirate with a live bird on her shoulder. She offered me Hamantaschen. 3 years later, Rabbi Fred married us in this sanctuary. I went from wondering whether I could really be my whole self in a synagogue to smashing a glass with my beloved and raising our kids here.
Thank you. So, say that you have found your story for this New Roof Spring fundraising campaign, and you've even gotten a few verbatim quotes. This is good. Now you're going to want to shape that story into a particular kind of story arc. A story feels satisfying when it has a beginning and a middle and an end, and the formula for shaping it for most fundraising stories is simple but powerful. By the way, that last story was just there to sort of be evocative and include a lot of fun details and informality so that it would ring true. Hopefully it did. I completely made it up. All right. So let's assume you have gone out, you've gathered some really good stories, you've gotten permissions and you have some notes. And now you want to shape this story into an arc for the purpose of a fundraising appeal. So the first part of this story arc is you're going to name a challenge that the person or the group was facing. What was missing in their lives or difficult? The second is you're going to say what the response was from the congregation. How did the synagogue step in? Third is the transformation. What changed for the better? Okay. And you can think back on that story about the woman who met her beshert at the Purim party. And it has all three of those, right? Her challenge was she wasn't sure if she would find a synagogue that felt like home. The response was that she met Cheryl there, and the community was fun and supportive, and the rabbi was awesome, and the transformation was that she is now that she smashed a glass there, and she is now raising her children in this synagogue. And that leads you forth to the ask. So, what can the reader do now to help make more transformations like this possible? So, for example, I'm I'm now going to set our happy couple from the Purim event aside and make up some new people. Here is a short story that follows this arc. When Maya moved here, she knew no one. Our Tot Shabbat group immediately welcomed her and little Tashi. Now she says, I finally feel at home, and Tashi can't stop singing Tot Shabbat songs. Our home needs a new roof. Cost $21,000. Click the green donate button to make your gift before May 31st so we can ensure that families like Maya and Tashi keep feeling right at home. Now let me read that again and call out the four steps. When Maya moved here, she knew no one. Challenge. Our Tot Shabbat group immediately welcomed her and little Tashi. Response. Now she says, I finally feel at home, and Tashi can't stop singing Tot Shabbat songs. Transformation. Our home needs a new roof, cost $21,000. Okay, that's not one of the four steps, but I'm going to name it. That's a bridge from the story to the campaign goal. Click the green donate button to make your gift before May 31st so we can ensure that families like Maya and Tashi keep feeling right at home. That's the ask. It's specific. It's telling people, it's asking people to do a specific thing by a certain time, and it's telling them how they can do it. I want to also mention, if that story is not striking you as like the most riveting, amazing story you've ever heard, it's not. But that is a full story arc in only 70 words. And it ends with an invitation to help the next Maya. You throw in a photo of Maya and Tashi, and you've got the elements of a good appeal message. You can have other versions of this story. The 70-word version will fit on a printed postcard that you could mail to all religious school parents and recent empty nesters. That postcard could have the URL, the web address for your donation webpage, and a scannable QR code on it. The back side of the postcard could be a photo of Maya and Tashi with your synagogue's logo superimposed. If you're familiar with the website Canva, you can easily create the postcard I just described and then order the number of copies you would need to mail them out. You can also scale this little story's word length and level of detail up or down. A front page newsletter article aimed primarily at members who are more active than average, the members who read the newsletter, could tell a 300-word version of this story with 2 or 3 accompanying photos. That version is probably more interesting, probably has more humor in it, probably has more details, might tell more about Maya and Tashi's life. A snail mail printed letter aimed primarily at older congregants, could run 350 words with photos and an emphasis on generational continuity mixed in. If you can squeeze that 70-word story down to 25 words with a photo or maybe a short video of um, uh, Maya and Tashi just kind of goofing around and smiling, then you have a social media post. Okay. I know I'm kind of going fast, but I've built a lot of repetition of core concepts into the presentation, and you will have the access to the chapter of the fundraising guide, which is going to cover all this all over again. So let me blaze on. And before we've covered too many things, we'll actually have a moment for review and questions. All right. Let's say that you have found your story for the campaign you're getting ready to do. You have shaped it into an arc that ends with an ask. You've even written some different length versions of it. This is a good time to go back over what you've written and see if you can enliven it with vivid language. Stories really connect when they feel real. So instead of writing something like, our Shabbat dinners are meaningful, it's better to describe what they're actually like. The hum of voices around the table, the smell of warm challah, the sound of children singing before candle lighting. Of course, that's easier to do for the longer version of your story, but you can often sharpen and sensualize the stories that you tell without changing the word length too. It takes a little bit more time and effort to do that, but it can be done. And you can always improve it a few notches, even if you can't make it the most vividly detailed thing because of a word limit. These sensory details will transport readers into the scene. So if you can replace abstract or dull language with living description, you're ahead of yourself. There's also kinds of languages you don't want to use, by the way. And that would be anything that sounds like fundraising jargon, like the phrase impactful engagement. Impactful engagement could mean anything. Instead, just describe what really happens and how it feels, or let somebody else tell you how something really happened and how it felt. Making your language more specific and vivid does not mean you have to use fancy multi-syllable words. Plain language is powerful when it's specific and true. All right. Now, let's turn to another tip specific to fundraising storytelling for synagogues. There is an important way that congregational fundraising messages should read differently from the messages many cause-oriented nonprofit organizations use. In many of those fundraising stories, you'll learn about an inspiring impact that the organization has had on people it serves, and then they will describe the existing need and what it will take to meet it. And then the donor is cast as the hero who swoops in to save the day. Your gift by December 31st of $180 or more will make it possible for the Friendly Animal Shelter to keep 10 dogs and cats out of kill shelters in 2026. That formula of the donor being kind of the solitary actor who does the mitzvah, who swoops in as the hero and makes an element of the overall mission happen, is very effective in general nonprofit fundraising. But addressing the prospective donor as an individual who can save the day doesn't quite fit for members of religious congregations. First of all, synagogue members aren't the same as supporters of a charitable cause. Supporters of a charitable cause's entire relationship with the organization might be as a recurring donor. Synagogue members belong to a community and have a more direct and varied relationship with the organization. In many cases, the synagogue is an organization that helps provide members with a sense of identity, and often the members who are being asked to donate have already helped build it or achieve some previous goals. They're already part of the story. So instead of writing, your donation saved the religious school from closing, it would be better to write, together we kept our school thriving and your generosity helped make it possible. Instead of writing, it depends on you. You can help a refugee family get the supplies and services they need next year. You would go with something more like, together we can help refugee families get the supplies and services they need and enact Beit Shalom's Tikkun Olam values. That shift from you to we reflects how communities truly operate. It's a partnership built on shared ownership, shared commitments, and shared joy. So what I just said to you is based on lots of different examples of presentations and articles that I read, mostly from the world of church fundraising, but also a bit from the world of synagogues. But this is kind of the conventional wisdom that experts offer about this distinction, to emphasize the we, to support and remind and invite the donor into this implied narrative of being a part of a community that is doing these things together. All right. Let's pause for a moment so we can quickly review and make time for any questions. So far, I've covered some basics of storytelling for fundraising. I've talked about the importance of collecting and using real, authentic, and moving stories about people's experiences in the congregation for fundraising campaigns of all kinds. I've talked about the importance, we learned about how to make the ask effective by using details, by being specific, by giving people instructions, and the importance of writing with a specific audience in mind. I offered ideas for how to talk with people in your community and ask them to share their stories. And then we learned about how to take those stories and quotes from people and shape them into a 4-part story arc that identifies a challenge someone was facing, describes how the congregation responded, tells about a positive transformation that resulted, and concludes with an ask that is connected to that story. And I covered the importance of going over your story and making edits that bring out vivid and sensory details. And then we learned about using language that invites donors to be a part of a community that seeks to achieve goals together, rather than language that portrays each donor as an individual hero who is needed to save the day. We're going to learn some more pieces of advice, but for now, do people have questions? And I invite you to use the raise your hand feature. I see, okay, I'm going to call on Susan and then Dan Rome, because that's the order in which I saw your virtual and real hand. Susan.
Maurice, thank you. This is great what you're doing. It's so timely. We are, as you know, we're in the middle. We've just started our what we call Season of Giving, which is our annual fund. And one of the things we talked about in our fundraising committee is what's the best way to thank donors? And some people thought, oh, you should do an event for the largest donors. And other of us said, to your point about community, no, we should thank all the donors. and not distinguish between the larger donors and the less large donors. And we have gravitated to that approach. So we're going to do a bagel brunch and invite everybody who's given. So I'm just curious as to what your response is to that.
So there's a whole chapter of the guide called Donor Recognition and the Art of Thanking Donors. And it dives right into these values-based discussions that happen in probably all of our congregations. And I think in our movement, this is a very important set of decisions. And because this is meant to be a guide that's helpful to an array of congregations that may land in different places in terms of what they decide, and also what kind of campaign they're doing. Like they might treat a capital campaign differently than an annual campaign. What I try to do is sort of just identify a lot of the core values that are at stake and share some examples from how actual Reconstructionist communities have navigated the tensions and the competing goals that they experience as they're trying to achieve several goals at the same time, right? So like they want to make sure everybody feels thanked, everybody is actually thanked, and that everybody who wants to be recognized in some, to the rest of the community is recognized. I say it that way because there are always some people who actually want to be anonymous. Um, and then there's a question of, you know, to what degree do we risk promoting like social status hierarchies in the manner that we do thanking and recognizing? But on the other hand, to what extent do we risk potentially frustrating or alienating people who might make major gifts? And both of those things are real. And what I can do is I'm happy to attach that chapter along with the chapter on storytelling when I send the follow-up email. If you're
That would be
interested
great.
in that and you want to get an early look at that.
That would
Um,
be great.
sure. Dan, you had your actual hand up. Did you
Yeah,
still want to chime
yeah,
in?
thanks, Maurice. Susan, quick comment on what you just said. In our congregation, we actually don't make the thanks at all proportionate to the size of the gift. Now, but it does have the downside that Maurice suggested. It's a complicated issue. It's a longer conversation. Maurice, I'm thinking about your first story, where the new member finds her bashert at Purim, and they marry and live happily ever after, presumably. How do you shape an ask from that? I assume it's not, please support our congregation so we can produce more happy marriages. What
So I think you
the
could
reason
use
I'm
that.
putting it that way is that there are a lot of these variations on the happy stories of I'm glad I joined, but how would you shape that one into an ask?
So what I was trying to convey, and I may not have done it well enough, is I wanted to convey the idea that that story could actually be the impact story that leads into any number of different kinds of fundraising campaigns. So I think you could tie it to the campaign to raise the $21,000 for a new roof, especially if it wasn't the only story that was part of that campaign. If you had three different stories where the theme was how the synagogue helped create someone's home and how the synagogue also feels like home, then you could actually make that explicit and have, those three different stories go out, over 3 consecutive weeks or over every other week over 6 consecutive weeks, if that was how long you were going to be, actively campaigning hard for that $21,000. You could even attach a slogan to those stories that had to do with the idea of home. So the content of the story doesn't necessarily have to seem like an obvious match for the goals of the campaign. And I'm realizing I may have given the impression that generally speaking, you're only going to have one story to emphasize in the course of a campaign. That's probably not the case. You're probably going to have a few stories. And you might also use those stories to make a primary audience decision for several different emails to segments of your community. If you're a synagogue that has a big queer chavurah, like a lot of our synagogues do, that's also an audience. If you're a synagogue that has a lot of people who, for whatever reason, have worked in law offices, then that's another audience that has common work experiences, but also maybe some shared values. And you might pick a story that speaks more to those things. I don't want to get too far afield. I believe I said Scott would be next, and then we'll hear from Glenn and Stephanie, and then we're going to stop. Hi, Scott.
Hi. So my question is sort of pivots a little off of something that Susan said and a little bit of what Dan said. So if you gave us an example related to the, repairing a roof, and
Yep.
that has a lot of, great storytelling, opportunities and stuff. But Susan mentioned about, they're in the season of giving. And so, do you have a best practices thought on, is it better to have just an annual campaign that adds to a building fund, let's say, so you're not necessarily hitting a congregation with now we got to spend $21,000 on a roof, and like that, like in a smaller congregation, I I think it'd be hard to ask people to suddenly set aside money, oh, for a roof this year, and when's the air conditioning going to go out? And like I that's why I like sort of the season of giving, which you can still use the storytelling and everything, but I didn't know if there was best practices on that.
There isn't a one size fits all. And some of what um, there the first several chapters of the guide get into thinking about what kinds of fundraising you're currently doing, and then trying to learn about the array of options that you could choose to either add to what you're currently doing or to replace some of what you're currently doing. So that menu includes options like, let's do an annual campaign. We haven't been doing that for a while. So you could choose that option. And what you'll see, and we'll actually talk about this in the last class session. The last class session includes some advice around trying to for your board to and your key staff to try to figure out together how much bandwidth you have between your clergy staff and lay leaders and possible short-term volunteers, but how much bandwidth do you have? And if you were going to do more in the coming year, how can you make sure that you stay within that bandwidth limit, which I think is important to do. So you might be a congregation that says, I don't think we've got it in us to sustain an annual campaign, but maybe we could do an every other year campaign. Or maybe we could do it this year and just know amongst ourselves that this might not happen again the following year. Okay, I didn't really answer your question. Like, is it better to have like predictable, regular fundraising campaigns as opposed to emergency campaigns for one-off needs? That's just super case by case. Like
Okay.
you know your own community. Um, and it's super case by case. I mean, sometimes you can get backed into a corner where you don't have a choice. I will tell you, I don't think there's any reason why I shouldn't share this because it's common knowledge, but it may be a surprise to uh, sorry, I'm to TBI Eugene. Ron, thank you. It may be a surprise to Ron because it's ancient history. So when I graduated from RRC in 2003, and then I got hired to join the rabbinic staff at TBI in Eugene as their associate rabbi. And in the period of time between when I signed my contract and when we moved to Oregon, it turned out that the previous executive director had a mental health issue that had resulted in her embezzling a lot of the money that was in the budget. And she didn't keep it for herself. She used it to shower the rest of the staff and volunteers with gifts and chances to go out to dinner that everybody thought seemed weird and like, where is the money coming from? So they didn't have the money to pay me. And they threw an emergency fundraising campaign. And in 3 weeks, they raised my salary for the year. I don't know how that worked. I don't know how that felt. I don't know what the upshot of that was. I just know they did it.
They probably didn't use the Purim story, but
Probably not. Yeah. So there you go. Stephanie. Wait, did I skip someone? Who did I skip? Glenn.
Glenn is next, yeah.
Thanks, Stephanie, for not jumping in. So the roof thing is like you talk about it is one type of thing, but that's an emergency. Like I would think that you'd have to raise that money really fast so that the kids in the Hebrew school are not soaking wet, in case it rains. But and annual kind of things, like I want to put that aside. Like for us, what we're trying to do is to put on more programming to engage the community. So we're doing a series around, like Israel and Gaza. We're going to follow that up with one about like anti-Semitism and how do we all deal with that and understand what's happening, and that'll lead into social justice kind of things. Of course, doing those things cost money, but
Yep.
they're valuable. So my question is, for a campaign to be effective, do you have any thoughts about how long you would need to run that? Yeah, because like you talked about having multiple stories, I would imagine that, month one, you send out one kind of mailing, one kind of message. The next month, maybe there's another story that you're telling, building along, the concept. What's about the right length for a good, successful campaign, other than it's the end of the year, and so make your tax donations now,
Sure.
type of thing.
No, that's a great question. So we're going to learn about what are ideal lengths for a variety of different kinds of fundraising campaigns. And that's going to actually start next session because I'm going to use the term campaign to also refer to like a one-off event that may be designed to be a fundraiser. Or that may be serving more than one purpose. Like it might be a fundraiser and an adult ed or tikkun olam kind of event. But other types of campaigns that last weeks or months, we're gonna learn about some of those, like an annual campaign, or like a campaign aimed at um, uh, getting uh, getting people who take a required annual distribution from a retirement account to try to get tax benefits by donating some of the money from that annual distribution. There's a season and sort of an ideal length for that kind of campaign as well. And if you just stay tuned and stay with us, we're going to cover some of that. It's important. And it's also, and it's all, the key thing I want to highlight from your question is the fact that it matters before you do a campaign like that, that everybody's agreed on how long it's going to last and what, what the different communication volleys are going to look like and when it's over, whether you met your goals or not. Those are all, that's important to be clear about that so that you don't waste people's energy. Um, okay, there was one more person.
Stephanie.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Sure, no problem. This is more just a sharing or a comment as opposed to a question. I hope that's okay. Because so for context, Ner Shalom at this point has about 200 households. So we do a season of giving, which is, starts at High Holy Days, runs through the end of the year. Last year, we also did a capital campaign for facilities, right? For a roof, for solar, for HVAC, et cetera. So, and what I wanted to share was like, I love how you gave us an example of a story that you could pivot for a lot of different purposes. And, Ner Shalom is lucky, we've been around for 30 years. We were able to use an actual member who is still with us. We told the story of how this person fixed the building 30 years ago, right? So if there's a story that you can leverage that is about what you're fundraising about, I would recommend doing that, right? Don't skip the obvious if you have something obvious, right? So
yes.
This man who had worked on the building, fundraised 30 years ago, was going to be part of the campaign again. And, we had a successful campaign around building the story around the building that had been the work that had been previously done.
I'm so glad. Yes, go on.
Let's take care of the next 30 years here at Ner Shalom. So, and that was a very successful campaign. And then for our season of giving, don't forget that we ask our members to write testimonials. So they tell their own stories from their own perspectives. And that is a really helpful one. It helps share the workload, right? But it also, it gives, it's their personal stories. These are active members, long-term members, newer members, right? It's just a variety of people and what they get out of their experience of participating in Ner Shalom. So I just thought I'd share that as well.
Yes, I'm glad that you did, Stephanie. And I get your emails, and I love that it seems like every 10 days or so I see an email that's gone out to your community that says why Ken and Sarah gave. And then, there's a story. It's their story, and there's a picture or two. And and it's authentic, it's real, and it gives people an opportunity to feel connected and to give. Yeah, I mean, I've even thought of actually sharing some examples of that because that's a really excellent um, communication strategy. And the thing you were saying before, Stephanie, about if I can say it a little bit differently, I was describing going on a story hunting adventure, right? Like you or some other volunteers or people on your fundraising committee or whomever is going out into the field and listening for really good stories, true stories, impact stories primarily, positive impact stories. And maybe you're even being more proactive than just listening for them. Maybe you're starting conversations with people in the hopes of eliciting stories, and that's okay too. But what Stephanie said was exactly right. That's not the only way you have to find your really terrific stories to tell. Some of the terrific stories you have to tell, lots of people already tell and retell within your congregation. Some of them are probably part of the folklore of your congregation. And we're going to talk, you helped me segue back about how you can collect those stories and keep them where you can have them handy to be able to use for any number of different campaigns. But before we do, we're going to dive back in. once you've got a story to use for a fundraising message, you may need to create different versions of it depending on the communications vehicles that you use. You'll want to match the word length to the medium. So here are some basic guidelines, and you do not have to remember these. This is going to be available to you in the chapter from the guide. But a print letter, 1 or 2 pages with a photo or two, can run 400 to 700 words. An email, typically 100 to 200 words with one image, and a big make your gift button that's super obvious, that people can click on. A postcard, I'm skipping newsletter for a moment, which I actually think is underutilized. A postcard with typewritten text can have 50 to 100 words on it. And then on the back side of the postcard, you have the chance to have an image that you want. Okay, a newsletter article can also be 400 to 700 words with photos. That really depends on the norms of your particular newsletter. A social media post, typically 2 sentences, maybe 3, with a photo or a video clip. A Shabbat announcement, keep it under 2 minutes. I would actually aim for 60 to 90 seconds. That's about 120 to 200 words. So, again, the idea is that in most cases, you're going to be sending appeal messages using a selected story, or maybe a handful of selected stories, in multiple formats. Let's imagine, for example, a campaign that's highly targeted and seeks to raise a modest amount of money, say $4,000, to fund a religious school aid position to support students with various special needs beginning in the fall. And the campaign's going to run for 6 weeks. You might choose to use 4 communication vehicles for your appeal message. You might do an email appeal, a social media post, a newsletter article, and a Shabbat announcement that recurs. Why might you choose those particular communication vehicles? Because this is not a campaign where you want to incur the expense of postage or getting customized postcards printed, but you do want to use the strategy of making sure your audience gets the message several different ways. So you've got your story, and you decide to start by writing the longest version of it, which in this case would be the newsletter article. Let's just imagine that you did that and it came in at about 500 words, and you had 2 photos. And next, you'll be working on the shorter versions, the Shabbat announcement at 200 words, the email appeal at 200 words with a photo, and a 40-word social media post with an accompanying image. As you shrink your fundraising story down, you'll stay true to the story arc structure. The challenge that you all are facing, the congregation's response, someone's positive transformation, and the ask. Or you can flip that and make it future oriented. The challenge we're facing going into the next school year, the desired congregational response, hiring the aid, describing what the positive transformations can be like if we are able to achieve the response, and then make the ask. Please donate before July 31st so we can hire our new aide in time for the first day of school, and make sure blah, 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 blah. Either make sure that we accomplish the things we described, or if you used a positive impact story about maybe a student who was given this kind of support in the past, then you can say, to donate to make sure that stories like Jesse's continue to happen again at our Torah school. The more you condense the story and shrink it, obviously, the more details will fall away. But one of the great things about your social media posts and your emails is that you can have the click here to help links take everyone to a dedicated donation webpage that tells a longer version of the story. and provides more photos too. So your super short version can actually take you to a longer version. Okay, I want to move forward. Okay, more in the world of tips and advice. We've already covered making the ask clear and making it super easy. So now I want to cover using photos and design wisely. It's important to include images in every communication medium that you can. You'll probably always have an opportunity to include at least one image in every communication form except for Shabbat announcements. We recommend using photos, but only when they're real. Don't use stock photos for fundraising messages. They feel fake. Use images of your own members and real congregational moments, not photos that feel anonymous. And there's an ethics to this, and it's covered in the guide. But you always want to get permission from anybody whose face you can see in a photo. You especially want to get permission for images of minors, and you do not want to share full names or identifying details about minors. One of the chapters in the fundraising guide called Laws and Ethics regarding fundraising includes a section on the ethics of the use of photos, and you'll be able to refer to that. You want to try to always include a caption with each photo and make the captions descriptive of what's happening, but also make them meaningful. Something like Maya and her son at Tot Shabbat, welcomed by volunteers, or the ones that you have on the screen in front of you. If you can insert photos that relate directly to their immediately proximate text content, that's good. I'm not going to dive into the basic principles of design involving the juxtaposition of text and photos, but common sense can take you a long way. So can finding a volunteer who's kind of good at it. And finally, go out of your way to triple check the spelling of people's names for any captions. Okay, and that actually goes for text content in general. Okay, this slide's important. Earlier, I described scenarios in which you would be planning a specific fundraising campaign, and you would have someone go out to talk with members connected to the fundraising campaign's focus. You'd be hunting for good stories and quotes until you found what you needed. That is a very worthwhile approach, but you will not always need to do all that work every time you want to launch a new campaign. If you enlist some of your members to be story gatherers year round, and if you also if you have a group of people that's doing some work on this, let them spend some time reminiscing and sharing the stories that are right at everyone's fingertips. It is a great practice to establish a story bank. It can be as simple as a Google Drive folder that can only be accessed by specific staff or volunteers. A story bank is a computer folder that contains stories that have all the permissions they need to be completely usable by the synagogue for any fundraising purposes. There shouldn't be any stories in the story bank that are not cleared for any use the synagogue wants. You can organize your story bank however you want. You can have categories like youth, life cycle moments, social justice. You can start filling your story bank by enlisting several members and staff to become good story gatherers. They should pay attention to the stories members share naturally, keeping an ear out for ones that inspire or that capture the quirky wonderfulness of your synagogue. When you are gathering stories, or if you're wanting to retell an old story that's part of your congregation's folklore, if it's about a particular person or people, ask them if it's okay to tell the story. Give them a version of what it might look like. Make sure they're okay with it. And if you're out there actually having a conversation with someone and you're like, this is a great story. I'm going to ask this person if maybe it could be part of our story bank. You can proceed however is most comfortable for you to try to reel in that story. Maybe you ask that person for coffee, or maybe that person even permits you to record them retelling it. If it's really funny, you might want to ask them if they'll retell it into your voice recorder. Um, so, uh, Same thing with any verbatim quotes, or a story itself. You want to make sure they understand that you're asking for permission for the synagogue to be able to use it for any publicity purposes or for fundraising. And if it's true that it might not get used, let them know that too, so they're not like waiting for it to appear. Um, you can also promote your story bank to your congregation and provide a link to an online form that people can fill out to share their stories and give the necessary permissions right there on the form. Once you've got a bunch of great stories in your story bank, you might be surprised at how easy it will be to write some of your next fundraising appeal messages. And you can have creative fun with this. You can be like, oh, we've got 8 stories now. What kinds of appeals could we potentially create based on some of these stories? You want to refresh the story bank by adding new stories every few months, and you may need to retire some of the older stories. By the way, I see people are posting in the chat, but I'm going to wait for more of a stopping point to be able to respond. Okay, let's say that a story goes into your story bank and it's been months since you collected it from someone, and then you decide y'all are going to use it. Let them know that you're going to do that. Um, if you've worked it into several different length versions, maybe send them the longest one and ask them, just give them a chance to say whether there's anything that didn't land quite right for them. Um, that's a good practice. You aren't obligated at this point to do that because they gave you permission, but it's a nice thing to do. Take everything I just said about creating a story bank and duplicate it for photos. Um, with photos, things are somewhat different because you'll be wanting to secure permission from everyone whose face can be seen in the photo. So don't be surprised if your photo bank ends up containing a lot of photos of just 1 or 2 people's faces. That's okay. You'll be able to use these photos for more than just future fundraising communications. Your photo bank it is a great place to be able to have an increasing number of free to use photos for all sorts of communications that you might do. All right. Um, Okay, you can also bring some people together who are interested in helping create uh, some stories for your story bank, and you can have a party and give people story prompts. In the guide, there are I present 10 different story prompts. What you're seeing on the screen are some examples of prompts that you can ask people who are just gathered in a group to use. And they may think of stories about their own experiences, or they may be reminded of stories about somebody else. And then that's okay. You can go ask that person um, to contribute more details to the story, to give their permission, etc. So I want to make sure that everybody gets that those are options. So here's a review of what this section was kind of all about. It's important to shape your stories that you're going to use into different story lengths for the different communications formats. We've talked a lot about the ask, photos and visual design, that this is important. You want to have captioned photos. You want to spell people's names right. You want to create your story bank and your photo bank, and you can also use prompts to develop some of your own stories. So I'm going to pop out of this for a moment. I see that it's 9:18. I really want to cover your core story, but I also think we'll have time to do that next time. So I'd rather give you all a chance to do some Q&A, and I'd like to be able to see what has been written in the chat. Oh dear, that's a lot. Let me see if I can see what we have here. So now I'm actually going to call on, um, gosh, who was it who so kindly offered to be helping me out with Zoom stuff?
Sherry,
That's right. Any chance you'd be willing to kind of scan what's in the chat and then like raise your hand and give a rundown?
who me? Stephanie or Sherry?
Sherry,
Okay, Sherry, you there?
is that cool? Okay.
Yes, I'm happy to. Sorry, I was having a computer moment.
No
Um,
worries. So while you're doing that, I'm happy to respond to questions provided verbally.
there was a lot of questions about the thanking people similarly or differently. Um, I think there were more comments maybe than questions.
Okay, that's good.
Suggestion that somebody actually gets a sort of overall photo consent. I mean, we certainly do one with our Hebrew school, but an overall photo consent is a useful thing. People had asked for a copy of our Season of Giving email, and I attached a link to that. GSW as a sponsor is Joe Lacob a member. I don't know what that means.
Golden State Warriors. Joe Lacob's one
Aha.
of
Oh,
the
that's
owners.
got it. Got it. If I am missing something, somebody put in the chat, will you please? There was stuff about thanking people separately based
That's
on the
great.
amount of their gift.
No, that's really
Yeah.
great. And I appreciate the suggestion about a consent form. I know that sometimes, right, that's popular for a lot of after school programs and for some religious schools, and some parents will decline. And some will say, no, go for it. You're welcome to use the photos. My suggestion is that if you end up using photos of kids for a fundraising communication, that even if it's already been covered by a kind of one size fits all consent by parents at the beginning, that you ask anyway. Because parents might not have sort of envisioned it being used, that particular way. And, the image may inadvertently not be whatever it is that they want next to whatever that content is. So it's just a good idea to be careful. And I appreciate Rebecca from Bet Shalom um, describing some of the rules. Synagogues are also going to have different rules. Okay, I see Scott and Stephanie. So Scott.
So I put in the chat about this idea that somebody has to be active, somebody has to own the story bank and the photo bank, really,
Yes.
because and this is from very bad personal experience, not at Beit Haverim, but on another not-for-profit I work at. Staff sometimes, different staff or different volunteers, they change over and they don't know the history behind the people in these pictures or in these stories. And if they were like, I'll see a picture sometime that emerges, and because the person creating the thing wanted to use it because it's the best picture, it's like, well, two of the people in the picture are no longer alive, so we really shouldn't have that picture anymore. Like there are things that happen that person didn't know that. So it just there needs to be some accountability on constantly refreshing the story and photo banks, but image banks in general, but also just having an active thing because unfortunately the banks wind up being people go, oh, this is great, I have it ready, I can use it whenever, and sometimes not good stuff happens. So
No, I think this is a really good point, and it's not just people who may have passed away, right? That would be an issue. Like, what if there was a horrible falling out, and like you said, a new staff person, and nobody checked, and but it's actually this kind of painfully embarrassing thing that has to then be apologized for. What I would say is. Um, Before you go ahead and use something that's been in a photo bank or even a story bank, um, this is one of the reasons why it's kind of good to say what I want to try to do is get in touch and even just say wanting to let you know that we're planning to do this because you'll bump into obstacles um, by taking that extra measure of care. Stephanie.
Yeah, that's a good segue for what I wanted to share. Just that I do think best practice is a couple things. One, having multiple people. Like we often have like they're unofficial committees, but like Sherry, myself, Rabbi Irwin, like Susan, whomever, like multiple people looking at these pieces of marketing collateral, right? That's what there's a fundraising, but it's really marketing collateral for the shul. Like anytime we put any kind of quote unquote branding out, we have multiple people looking at it to make sure all of these pieces are taken care of, right? And Mia, who's our education director example, is intimately involved in every year we also have the Hebrew schools they have a fundraising campaign that lasts multiple weeks, and it has the same format as our season of giving. We have different although last year Rabbi Irwin mostly wrote them, but like we checked in with the families. We a certain number of families were asked if we could interview the kids. Could we use, were they interested in participating? Can we use their images? Like we get buy-in at every moment if we're using people's images and stories because it is personal to them. So, and we want to have their buy-in and have them approve the message that is being attached to their image. There was that, and then the other piece was Glenn had posted in the chat about creating a conversation for the various shuls outside of this meeting to like be able to get together and talk about fundraising. And I think that's an interesting idea. And, yeah, I think that would be cool to participate in.
Absolutely. And that's we're definitely going to make sure that you have each other's contact information and, name, congregation, etc. And yeah, if as we move through the course, that turns into something that a critical mass of people want, I'm happy to try to help facilitate that to happen. Okay, I see Diana's hand, so I'm going to call on Diana.
Hi. So thank you for all this guidance. I think the only thing that kind of surprised me was talk of small fundraisers, kind of, like please give for this specific thing or this specific thing. And it kind of gave me the sense that maybe some congregations do kind of fundraising like little ones all year long, which is very different than what I'm used to, which is really just like one big one in the spring.
Yeah.
And so I just wanted to find out what your sense is of what's the most effectiveness in terms of bringing in money, but also in terms of maintaining a relaxed culture.
No, you're making me realize I used two examples and they both involved like responding to unexpected dilemmas and trying to raise a specific amount of money for that. And I wasn't trying to signal that like that's the most frequently occurring type of campaign or the most recommended type of campaign. I think that my brain just on both of those occasions thought up that type of example. The way I would respond to your question about like what is a recommended strong practice is it's going to be one that really makes a lot of sense for your congregation. And so, if your congregation is a Havurah and has like fewer than 40 households, then you might have an annual campaign that you do. And it also might happen every couple of years that there's not necessarily an emergency. There might be an opportunity. Oh, our RC just started this field placement program, and we could actually potentially have a rabbinical student here. Or apart from the field placement thing, they've got another thing where you could have a rabbinical student, who is doing an adult ed thing for 9 weeks with our community, but it would cost this, and we would love to do that. So, so that kind of thing might make a lot of sense for one kind of community, and it might feel like people are getting nickeled and dimed in a different community, where it would be only done under rare circumstances. And instead, you would really just focus on strengthening, um, recurring campaigns, and trying to figure out also the sweet spot of how not to overstretch your staff and your volunteers, but how to also not sort of fail to do as much as you could, to bring in funds. Believe me, when we get into next week, we're going to start talking about a variety of different kinds of activities that raise funds on very different scales, depending on what you're looking to do, and what might most suit your congregation. Does anybody have a final round question or comment or request? I really appreciate what I just learned from some of you, about photo banks. And I've made some notes because I feel like there are some additional recommended practices that need to be in the guide. And
Maurice,
yeah,
this is just building on the idea that someone else proposed, some kind of forum where congregations might exchange experiences. And maybe you plan to do this anyway, but maybe it's useful to have a semi-structured forum, which asks people who are interested to come to it. What have you done in your congregation that did work, and what have you done that didn't work?
totally. I love that. And I love the simplicity of that question and the abundance of wisdom that would come from
Yeah.
posing that question to one another. Okay, I want us to end by 9:33, because we started at 3 after. So I'm going to call on Ellen. You've got the last word, Ellen from Beit Haverim.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. I just want to put out another concept about fundraising, which you might want to consider, which is that one-on-one asking, one person asking another person money is the most powerful kind of fundraising. And Rabbi, you haven't covered that in this session,
No,
but
not yet.
I've personally been involved with a lot of fundraising in my career and my volunteer life. And I was surprised the other day when a rabbi from a different organization called me up and personally asked me for money. And I was so flattered and so excited that of course, I gave her money. And so um, it's not as scary as you would think, especially if you have the great stories that you're talking about. And I hope that we can cover the one-on-one fundraising techniques as well in this course.
I'm glad that you mentioned that. And it's interesting. Most of the material that I was able to find about one-on-ones, it was associated with capital campaigns.
Mhm.
And maybe that's not so surprising. But I think that you're right. I actually think that those kinds of asks, around an annual campaign, or could be really, really effective, especially if the person asking has donated themselves.
So that's
Um,
kind of a prerequisite.
right. And has a story, um, that they like to share, about why this place matters to them and why they're now volunteering their time to take the emotional risk to do this thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, I picked you. In fact, I'm looking at Scott Sapon. He's on the board of another organization in here. And I got an email from him just saying,
Yeah, I
I'm
did
so
that.
excited to be able to ask you, Ellen. I picked you. And, that personal one-on-one is just really effective. And so I think we should explore it more in the group.
Point.
So I will look at what we're planning to cover for the rest of the sessions and see if that's possible. I didn't have that planned going in, but I agree that it's important, and let's see what we can do.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, everyone. We're going to pick up next time with talking about core stories, and then we're going to shift to this fun topic called multi-purpose fundraising, which I think is going to energize everyone. Next time we'll get to do a group activity around your core story. Thanks for staying on a few extra minutes, and see you next week.